Jeff Gordon of the Post-Dispatch wrote something today, STL today, a tip sheet about how the latest prospect rankings suggest Jordan Walker still needs work. I don't know that I agree with that conclusion, although I love Jeff Gordon. It's just you had Fangraphs rate Jordan Walker as the number 12 prospect. Some have had him much higher, fourth or fifth. And I told you all about there was some smartest guy in the room stuff going on where the guy at ESPN, their prospect guy, had Jordan Walker at 14th. But remember the day I read you what he wrote when he said he rated Jordan Walker 14th? Everything in there was a rave review about how great he is.
Yes.
So same thing with Fangraphs. They were talking about how great everything that Jordan Walker is great. So my point being, and we'll say hello to John Denton here in a second, my point being, with all due respect to my good friend Jeff Gordon, just because someone ranks Jordan Walker 12th or 14th, it doesn't indicate that he needs more work. He may need more work, but not because he's ranked 12th or 14th compared to 4th or 5th. Because the people that ranked him 12th or 14th still absolutely raved about how great he is. So what difference does the number mean? What difference does the number make in terms of where he's ranked? Everyone agrees he's got unbelievable talent, and he's going to be really special. So does it really matter what the number is on the ranking? That's my point. John Denton joins us from MLB.com, and please follow him on Twitter at JohnDenton555. John, you can jump in on that. I had that little rant there, but I can't wait to start watching Jordan Walker take at bats in these exhibition games. But at this point, we know enough about him to say, you know what? Does it matter if he's the number 7 prospect or the number 9? How does that even matter at this point? It's all about performance,
Bernie,
right?
Yeah, Bernie refreshed my memory. I think that Pujols guy was the 13th round pick.
Yeah.
Tom Brady was 6th round pick. There's so many stories. If you're good enough, you'll make it. It doesn't matter where anybody ranks him. I mean, at 5 minutes after meeting him, you see that his demeanor and his maturity are off the charts. Like, there's no way that's a 20-year-old kid. And I think I told you guys last week, coming out of high school, his nickname was the resume, 3.9 GPA, the Duke scholarship. He acts like he's 35 years old, maturity-wise. He's 6'5", 250. He's got everything. You don't want to say somebody's a can't-miss kid, but he's almost a can't-miss kid because he's got every facet. Now, does that mean he's going to hit this season? Does that mean he's going to hit in September? I think it'll come at some point. That just doesn't mean it's going to happen in April, but he's got too much going for him to be bothered by whether he's ranked here or here by this certain service.
John, you know me, man, already. You know me long enough to know how I roll on certain things. Like, even though I love the ritual spring training, I don't know that I'm hanging on like batting practices and talking, like how this guy looked or whatever. I haven't even asked you about that, but I can't help but wonder what it's like even to just watch him take live batting practice or regular batting practice and the impression that he's made. And I understand it's only batting practice, but all eyes are on him. So what are your impressions?
Yeah, it's Bernie, when he takes batting practice, when it's just a coach throwing, there's a different sound. People talk from 20 years ago of Albert Pujols. There's a different sound coming off of that bat as opposed to other bats. And, I mean, he hits the ball so far, and he hits the ball, so flush. I think Palm Beach, his rookie ball year, I think he had a ball leave the bat at 116 miles an hour, one of the fastest balls they've ever recorded. Like I said, it just sounds different. Now, against live pitching, it hasn't gone that well, to tell you the truth. There's been a lot of whiffs today. And like you said, there's nothing you put in this. There's no stock you put in this. It's just observations. But today, he had an epic at-bat against Ryan Helsley. I mean, Ryan Helsley had a dominant season as a closer. Walker fell in an 0-2 hole. He got it back 2-2. He fouled off 4 straight pitches, and he ended up striking out on a slider in the dirt, But that's one of those at-bats where it'll go down as a strikeout, but the kid fought his butt off. He stayed alive in the count. He made Helsley walk around the mound a couple times and pick up the rosin bag. I tell people all the time, he's 6'5" and 250. But he's not a 50 home run guy. He's a guy who hit .300 every month last season at Springfield, except for one. So, he's a guy who'll do what it takes and hit the ball the other way when he needs to. And it was impressive against a top-shelf closer like that to make that a 9 or 10 pitch at bat. That was impressive.
Yeah, I agree. John, the only thing I'll say, and you know me, man, I dig into the numbers probably to excess, but I just like to kind of know, if I can, what I'm talking about, rather than guessing. The only thing I've read from a couple people that I really respect, and they didn't make a big deal about it. I think Keith Law was one of them. But I've seen a couple of the prospect guys say, he has had a really high ground ball rate in the minors so far. I'm talking about Jordan Walker, and I also think that's. I'm not going to say it's easy, but I know it's fixable because he's not the only guy that comes to the big leagues and he hits a lot of ground balls. I mean, he seems like he's got what it takes to adjust. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he's under control. He's not a guy that you see who's falling down all over himself. He's not swinging from the heels and swinging out of his shoes. He takes a good controlled swing. I mean, he was facing Anthony Miskiewicz the other day, and a tough lefty, and he hit the ball in the outside corner, and he takes it the other way, hits it in the gap. He's a guy who's going to do that. Like I said, he's not. I don't think he's going to be a 40 home run guy, maybe ever in his career, but he's going to be a guy who gets you, 30 home runs and 35 doubles and that sort of thing. He did hit into a lot of ground balls double plays last year in Springfield, but that's correctable. Dylan Carlson did that. Tommy Edman kind of corrected that last year. That's something you correct, when you learn launch angle and those sort of things at the major league level. And like I said, he's a 3.98 student. He had a scholarship to Duke. His father went to MIT. His mother went to Harvard. You're not dealing with a dummy here. This is a smart kid, and he will do well with coaching.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to him. It's going to be all eyes during the exhibition games. John Denton with us from MLB.com. His second year covering the Cardinals, covers them great. We're really happy we have him on with us once a week because it's excellent information. Plus, I just enjoyed having conversations with John. What did you think? What were your initial impressions about the list of 5 guys who are finalists for the fan vote for the Cardinals Hall of Fame? We're talking about Freese. We're talking about Renteria. We're talking about 3 pitchers, Carlton, Morris, and Andujar. What do you think of that group?
I think we're going to be watching David Freese put on a red jacket. Recency bias kind of plays into that, and we all know what David Freese did, local kid, and the 2-run, 2-out double with 2 strikes to tie the game and then win it. David Freese is going to get in. But, my father, who knew more baseball than I'll ever know in my lifetime, said that Steve Carlson was the best left-handed pitcher he ever saw. He thought he was maybe better than Sandy Koufax. And, I know his best days were with the Phillies, but he won a World Series in St. Louis. He had a 20-win season in St. Louis. He had a season where he was second in the NL in ERA. Like we all know, Steve Carlson was one of the greatest pitchers of all time. I'd like to see him get in. And Joaquin Andujar kind of gets a bad rep for the way, 1985 fell apart. But the guy won 20 games in 1984. He won 21 games in 1985. Was a great pitcher in Cardinal history. It wouldn't break my heart if either one of those pitchers got in because, for a short period, they were both excellent Cardinals.
And I thought Matty Morris had just a terrific career for the Cardinals, and maybe gets overlooked a little bit. I mean, he's got a prominent place in a lot of the franchise rankings, including wins. They only had 13 pitchers to win at least 100 games. He's one of them. So I mean, it's a tough. I actually think it's an excellent group. I really do. The guy that I feel very strongly about, but I totally agree with you about David Freese. It's a special category, and I'll never forget being there for every moment of that 2011 postseason and even 2012. What he did to save the Cardinals in that division series against the Nationals. A couple of the best at-bats I've ever seen. Like borderline ball strike calls, and he had the discipline to lay off and drew a walk that set up the winning rally. I mean, so even though the longevity isn't ideal per se, that 2011 postseason transcends everything. And he was a Cardinal for 5 years. It's not like he just passed through town. But the guy I was going to talk about was Renteria. But go ahead, my friend.
And, I mean, in the history of the LCS, there's only been 9 players in the history to win NLCS or, ALCS, NLCS MVP, and World Series MVP. David Freese is on that list. I mean, that's enough said. And we all know that legends are made in St. Louis in October. And, David Freese had one of the best postseasons in Cardinal history. The run he put together that fall was just unbelievable. He took the Cardinals to another level. That was, at the end of the regular season, that didn't seem like a World Championship team, but David Freese elevated the Cardinals to world champions by, picking up the team and kind of carrying them for long stretches of that playoffs.
Yeah, during this long stretch of winning baseball since, we can just go back to the start of division play if we want, or since Bill DeWitt and his partners took over in 1996. At a time where there's more playoff games because there's more postseason rounds. Pujols got the most RBIs, Molina's second, and Freese is right there with him. I mean, that itself says a lot about the way he performed on the biggest stage of all.
Yeah, I think he's going to be wearing a red jacket come August. I think they'll be fitting him for a red jacket.
And I hope, John, that the voters at some point turn their attention to Edgar Renteria, because he was a terrific Cardinal, one of the best shortstops they ever had. Really, really something, with all those gold gloves and silver sluggers, all-star nods. I mean, only Cardinal in the history of the franchise to win the gold glove and a silver slugger in consecutive seasons. No one else has done that. Like when you win both awards 2 years in a row. No one's done it, and they've had some great players.
Edgar was so overlooked, just so solid. He wouldn't blow you away with how flashy he was, but just everyday solid. One of those guys you can count on. Like, you watch him play and you understand why Tony La Russa loved him so much, is because he was the same guy every day. Like you said, he had 3 silver sluggers and 2 gold gloves, and just one of those guys that, and I think he ranks second in home runs and stolen bases among all Cardinal shortstops in history. He's right there in third in RBI and batting average and all those. One of the most underrated players in Cardinal history, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. John, when the exhibition games start, which is right around the corner here this weekend, I think I ask you versions of this question every time you're on, so I apologize. But I also know you've had another week to watch the team before they start. Who are you particularly not anxious, but you're looking forward to seeing? And I know Jack Flaherty, we've talked about him, so you don't have to talk about him again because you've done it so often. But who are you really looking forward to seeing? I know when I used to cover spring training, there was always a couple, 3 guys where I'm like, I am really, really curious about what we're going to see, even though it's, quote, just exhibition games. Who's on your list?
Yeah, Bernie, I've got a story coming out today with Dylan Carlson. He's put on 14 pounds. The Cardinals have him on a 4,500 calorie a day diet. He's eating 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, eats dinner, and then he downs a protein shake before he goes to sleep at night. And, we've all heard the stories about he put on this, he put on muscle. And he looks different. Like, Dylan's back to the guy who's driving the ball in the gaps. He's the guy who's hitting the ball over the fence. A lot of what he did last year was hurt. Like, it was injury related. He had a wrist thumb thing that he hurt in August against the Yankees when he slammed in the fence. Dylan says, everybody were crying last year, maybe he shouldn't be a switch hitter. Well, he's been a switch hitter since he was 5 years old. When he was in the minors, he hit the ball better on the left-handed side than he did the right-handed side. I think he's going to come back and have a bounce-back season. He's hitting the ball better. He's stronger. His exit velocity numbers so far are dramatically increased. I think Dylan is kind of California cool, and he doesn't show a lot of emotion. But I think maybe the Cardinals lit a fire under him this offseason. They told him, you're a first-round pick, and this is what we expect. They expect the guy from 2021 who had 18 home runs and 30 doubles, not the guy who hit 8 home runs last year and barely 200 from the left side of the plate. So I think the Cardinal fans are about to see a new Dylan Carlson this season.
Oh, I can't wait to read that story at MLB.com, and thanks for sharing it, because you're right about – I heard people back in St. Louis have been talking a little bit, but they didn't have any confirmation, if you will, about him putting on weight in a good way. And so you just verified that for us. And you know better than I do, but I know Jim Hewer feels the same way. You know, we watched him last season, and I'm not going to say he looked gaunt, but he did not look strong. He did not look like the picture of vitality. So I think this is a potentially very important step.
Bernie, he's one of those guys who can eat everything he wants and won't put on weight. So, you and I are both very envious of him, I'm sure. But they have him eat like potatoes, eggs, oatmeal for a first breakfast. Then he goes to the cage for an hour, and he comes back and eats an omelet, avocado, more potatoes. And then after he comes off the field, he eats a lunch. Then he goes to the weight room. Then he eats a second lunch. Then he goes home and eats steak and potatoes. And like I said, he does a protein shake before he goes to bed. 4,500 calories. He stayed in St. Louis up until Thanksgiving. Got on the lifting program. He's doing like a 4-day-a-week lifting program, and he's eating 4,500 calories a day. And he's noticeably bigger through the chest. And, like you said, last season he was in the 180 range, and he's a solid 205 now. So I just think, too talented for people to give up on him. Like, to give up on Dylan Carlson at 24 is foolish. We all know he has a baseball background. He's too talented to roll your eyes at, and I think he's got a big season ahead of him.
Well, I'm really glad. Great information, man. Thank you. One other thing, another story you wrote, it was over the weekend. I really got into it. I thought the piece on Nolan Gorman was great because he's a special interest to me because I'm convinced that he's going to be a kind of, wow, did you see how he hit that ball? I think he's going to be one of those guys for a long time. And you reported that he understands last year they were getting him out, fastballs especially, but up in the zone. They found the weak spot, and they hammered him with it. And he has spent, according to your writing, he has been obsessed with closing up that hole, learning how to hit high fastballs or just up in the zone fastballs. Tell us about that, man, because it was a great piece, and I want people to go back and read it.
Thank you. Yeah, Bernie, we all know that, Major League Baseball, word spreads quickly, and, it's a copycat league, and if people start getting you out one way, they're going to stick with it. And, people realize they could get him out. You throw him off speed low, he's going to hit it 400 feet. But if you throw him elevated fastballs, you can get him out. And, Ali Marmol just told him, he said, look, that's not good enough what you did last season. Like, people are going to adjust to you, and you've got to be able to adjust. And they've got him where he's not doing as high a leg kick. It's more of a toe tap thing now. And they have a pitching machine that can throw the ball like 105, 100 miles an hour. And he would crank it up every day and just serve himself high fastballs. And, he's changed his stance. He's changed the way he approaches high fastballs. He doesn't collapse as much on his inside side. And he's getting to those pitches now. I watched him put on a show the other day. They had the pitching machine cranked up to 100 miles an hour, and he was hitting balls to the other field. Like, his power, like I tell you, Jordan has power. Nolan Gorman has even more power, if that's believable. The way the ball leaves his bat, it's effortless power, and the ball jumps off his bat. So, he got a really wake-up call last year. They had some success early on, and then baseball said, okay, let's see how you do with this. And, he got sent down to the minors, and it was a wake-up call for him. So I'm curious to see if he can handle the high fastballs that pitchers are going to throw at him again this year.
No doubt. John, as always, great information and a pleasant conversation, so thank you for your time. And we'll be reading you. I can't wait to read the Dylan Carlson piece. That's coming up. Will that be online later tonight or tomorrow morning?
Yeah, it should be up within the next hour or so. But
looking forward to it, man. Looking forward to it. Good work.
You're the best.
Thanks so much, my friend.
Take care.
Bye. All right, that's John Denton, MLB.com. The very personable John Denton. Hell of a dude. Mm-hmm. At John Denton 555 on Twitter. So, Jim, you and I know we must have had 10 conversations about this last summer.
Yeah.
Where Dylan Carlson just looked. He almost did look gaunt, actually.
Yeah.
And I give you credit because you actually pointed this out before I started, kind of obsessing over it a little bit. Like, why does he look so physically weak? We know that he was hurt. He was legitimately hurt with his wrist, and that's not an excuse. When you're hurt, and it affected his swing. But on top of that, which impacted his power, drained it, a lot of it, he just wasn't physically strong. And you pointed that out, and it's true. So the idea that, he's bulked up and physically just looks, substantially different, that's good news. It really is.
I'm curious to see. I know I'm going to try and catch some of the games over the weekend. I'm going to see what he looks like, how he looks, because the minute I started picking up on that, Brent, I was like, man, he just looks thin, and you can't be thin middle of the baseball season. It wasn't late in the year; it was middle of the year, and I'm like, you're never going to be able to recapture that weight or anything throughout the rest of the baseball season, and it just looked so much more than in years past. It's hard to describe it, but it's just one of those things that I watch them and go, ooh, he's not this athlete that you see. It's just in better shape, and that's just the best way I can describe it. I could tell his arms were thin, his chest, the whole bit, and if they got him putting away that many calories, it's obvious they saw the same thing. It'll be an interesting watch because right about 205 is, I think it was what John described, and that looks just about right for his frame. Because he does have good flexibility, he can move well. He's not one of those guys you look where he's tight all the time. Like a Tyler O'Neill, where it can be real tight to watch him try and move. He's real fluid, and that's encouraging into itself. Then you throw in the fact that the wrist, the thumbs, whatever that all issue was, there seems to be ready to go. That'll be a fun watch because if he can be a 20 to 25 home run guy, 30 35 double guy. Switch hitter, starts hitting right-handed pitching. He could be another reason why this lineup looks a lot longer and gets a lot tougher.
No doubt about it. So, I poo-pooed the idea of because I was just sick of the narrative, and I think it was overstated, that there's all this competition in camp. I don't see much competition except all of these outfielders know that the big fella's waiting in the wings. So – and once he's put on the big club, he's going to play a lot. Talking about Jordan Walker, and so you got O'Neill having to reestablish himself, and Carlson having to prove that the breakout is imminent. I'm very confident in Nootbaar, but again, everybody wants to make sure that he can do what we saw him do in the second half, especially last year. He can do it over. He can sustain it and maintain it and keep going. Everyone's got to prove the test of time. Mm-hmm. So my slant on this is a little different. I do see competition, but my definition of competition with this outfield is not guy against guy. These outfielders are competing. The competition is within. We can even talk about how they fit into a larger competition against each other. They all have things to prove as individuals, especially Carlson and O'Neill, but definitely Nootbaar as well. Mm-hmm. They have to prove that it's not going to be more of the same, that they are bigger or they are stronger, they are faster. They did a whole different training routine that they believe is going to change what they expect in 2023. Their competition is with themselves, not the other guy. Because if all three of these guys, but I'm focusing more on Carlson and O'Neill, if those guys prove that they are more physically able and the things they needed to change body-wise have been corrected, they need to prove that they can be physically up for the job and they can stay on the field, and that whatever weaknesses they've had will have been fixed, and now it's go time. That's the competition for me. It isn't like, well, is he going to get more at-bats than this guy? If they win the competition against themselves, if Dylan Carlson wins the competition against Dylan Carlson and O'Neill wins the competition against his former version of himself, Tyler O'Neill, then it's all going to fall into place for them. It's all going to fall into place. But if they're not better than what they were last year, if they aren't physically more solid and just more adept in all areas, speed, flexibility, stuff that will prevent injuries. If they didn't take care of that competition, then why would we be talking about competition among the outfielders competing against each other? That's the second step. That ain't the first step. But the way this thing's been portrayed, it's like the first step is like, oh, well, who's going to win this job and who's going to get more at bats and who's going to do this and that's part two. Part one is these guys have to sort of reestablish their credibility and show that it will be different this year. Then we can have debates all summer long about who should be playing based on performance. But people have gotten the sequence wrong about where the competition really is.
I like that. I like where you're going. Texter says, Bernie, O'Neill is going to be back to MVP caliber. He will hit 35 homers, 90 RBIs, 20 stolen bases, 275 batting average. Let's go Cards.
I'm very up on O'Neill, and y'all can tease me later. Seriously, I'm putting my chin out there for that. You can don't really hit me, but you know what I'm saying. I deserve a few punches if it's the same old thing. But I just have a feeling we're going to see the 2021 version of O'Neill. Carlson, the ability is there, but we've only seen it for a couple months at a time. And man, I'm glad that they got through to him to stress the importance of he has got to be physically stronger so he can go through the season remaining physically stronger instead of being a weakling physically, as he looked very much a lot of the time last season.
Text line says O'Neill needs to give some muscle to Carlson.
He could do that.
That would be nice.
Yeah, that's the only thing about O'Neill I saw. In fact, it was John Denton's piece, which was really good on O'Neill. But O'Neill said, oh, yeah, I got back to the heavy lifting. And I'm like, what? Dude, what? No. Now, if he's talking about upper body or whatever, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. But if he's faster, which everybody says that he is, and he was already, he's in the top 2% of all major league players in terms of speed, top 2%. But if he's more flexible and he's looser, there's no limitations on this guy, what he can do. The one thing about him, and I wanted to talk about this, I talk about O'Neill a lot, but I think Jack Flaherty and Tyler O'Neill are the two most important guys in that camp. I really mean that. I wanted to pick one pitcher and one hitter. Mm-hmm. But Tyler O'Neill also, I think, is going to be in better touch with his plate approach this year. I know this sounds strange to say. It's counterintuitive, but I did a deep dive earlier this week. And this will sound strange, but hear me out. Tyler O'Neill in 2022 was not aggressive enough at the plate. And you say, well, wait a minute. He's being more selective. That's a good thing. Wait, he's not swinging as much. So he's trying to cut down his strikeouts. Isn't that what we want? That's what we want as long as he doesn't lose power. But let me tell you something. His strikeout rate fell 3.5% last year, so that's good. You say thumbs up. But a lot of other things went down because I don't know whether this is Boris telling him, hey, you got to start pulling the ball. You got a chance to hit 45 homers. You got to start pulling it, So I don't know what he was doing, but I think his head was a little mixed up last year. Like, they have a thing of StatCast called meatball swings. That means you're swinging at a pitch that's basically perfect for a hitter to just destroy. Like, his percentage of swinging at those pitches last season went down by quite a bit from 2021. His exit velocity was down from 2021. The number of pitches that he swung at that were in the strike zone, the ones that he should be murdering, that percentage was way down. He was letting pretty handsome strikes go by him all the time. And he wasn't on the assault. He wasn't aggressive enough as a hitter. And by trying to pull everything, you know what it did? It led to a lot of ground balls because he was getting off balance, because he's trying to pull instead of hitting to all fields, because for a big fella, he's pretty good at that. So he hit a lot of ground balls last year, 45%. So something got messed up from his peak season, which was great, where he made some changes, and he had a very, very admirable goal, which was to cut down on his strikeouts. But in cutting down on his strikeouts, he lost the aggressiveness that also makes him a scary, dangerous, powerful hitter. And pitchers are like, well, thank you very much. You just decided not to swing in yet another meatball pitch, you know? So hopefully he's got that figured out too. And hopefully the agent and the agent's helpers quit talking to him about this stuff.
Let him do his thing.
It's amazing how much his profile changed. And it had a lot to do with why his numbers were off last year. You gotta, when you get strikes, man, you're up there, you're strong as could be, you can beat out base hits because you're fast as could be. You gotta hit the ball, and you gotta hit the ball and go. You don't stand there watching everything. So some people may disagree with what I'm saying. Like I said, I appreciate that he wanted to reduce his strikeout rate. The more contact he makes, the better. But he went too far with it. You know, it's one thing, you reduce your strikeout rate. In his case, you reduce your strikeout rate by not chasing pitches out of the zone. The way to do it is not by looking at pitches right down the middle instead of swinging at them. That's not how to go about it. Pound the strikes and not chase the junk. That's it. If you can do it that way, it'll be beautiful. But you can't steal your own power because you're letting really good strikes, meatball pitches, go right by you because you're being Mr. Selective all of a sudden. Didn't work for him. So I hope he goes up there ripping this season. I really do. And the only thing we ask, just don't chase stuff out of the zone. If you do that, man, if you take control of the strike zone, watch out.
Never turn down the meatball. Never.
That's right.
Texter says, it's scary, Bernie, that we are relying on two players to regain form from 2 to 3 years ago.
With O'Neill, it was only one season ago. I'll say that. Mm-hmm. And with Carlson, when was his form ever, dominant anyway? The point about Carlson, with all due respect, and I appreciate the text message, with him, it's putting a season together. He's never put a full season together. So when you say, we're counting on a guy, meaning Carlson, that, has to get back to form where they were, 2 or 3 years ago. Well, he was in that form for a couple months at a time, but he never sustained it. So at least O'Neill had that performance over a season. Carlson hasn't. He was 15% above average in 21. He's capable of doing better than that. And he was like 1% above average this past season, 2022. Whereas the big fella was 40% or so above average in 2021. I mean, he was way above average. He's one of the best hitters in the game. Carlson can be, we have seen from him, he can be a terrific hitter for about 2.5 months, and then he gets weak, and he doesn't hit the ball with authority, and then he just sort of reverts. He just sort of kind of circles down the drain again. He just can't sustain anything. But I appreciate the text. And as a general rule, you're right. I mean, to our caller there, you're right, or our listener, you're right as a general principle. The bottom line is we can disagree in terms about the timing or the time frame, but they are very much relying on two guys that have not shown that they can deliver what you expect and they expect every single year. That hasn't happened. I agree with that.
Follow up real quick. Said he meant Jack Flaherty, not Dylan Carlson.
Oh, that's all right,
yeah.
because it does apply to Flaherty. I mean, to Carlson. But you can make it a three-person list, absolutely. The Flaherty thing is, no question, is that true. And I tell you what, late last season, he finally started to look a little bit like that guy that we saw in 2019, and actually the first 2+ months of 2021 before he got hurt with that oblique at Dodger Stadium. I think it was actually on Memorial Day or the day after.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a start late, like last September against. Listen, and I know it was the Pirates. I get it, but again, he was competing against himself. I'm talking about Jack Flaherty, because he even said in a story that John Denton did that I thought was outstanding. Flaherty realized mentally, psychologically, he had to just let it loose. You know, like he was being really kind of reserved. Like he had so many injury issues, he didn't want it to happen again, so he just wouldn't let it fly. And one of his best friends told him, a guy who actually has a good pitching background, told him, "Hey, dude, you got to let it go.
Yeah,
you got to start attacking hitters. Get after." And he did. And then right after that, I think he had a game against the Pirates where he struck out 11 or 12, something like that. So he might. I think Jack's going to be pretty good this year, but is it just going to be pretty good, or is it going to be borderline great? And I am feeling optimistically about him, and it's because of that story and the fact that someone intervened and said, "Look, man, there is no other way to go about this. You have got to just let it fly now. You can't have these mental reservations and hesitancy. You got to go on the attack." And I think he's going to do that. And that gives me hope that we will see the better version of Jack Flaherty. But again, if I'm wrong, you can laugh at me. That's all right.
Well, Cardinals are hopeful. I mean, the reality is, like you said, the word attack. I mean, when he was right, it was strike one, strike two. Okay, now what do you got? If you're the hitter, you're down 0-2 or you're down 1-2 in a count almost every time out. I mean, he was attacking low and away. It's a strike. He couldn't do anything with it, so the hitters are letting it go, and they're behind in the count. I mean, it was so fascinating to watch him do his thing when he was right. If he can get that aggressiveness back and obviously pinpoint control, it'll be fun watching again. That's for sure.
I want to correct myself. It was September 22nd. He had nine strikeouts in 6 innings. Man, I was all screwed up. It wasn't the Pirates. It was the Padres. Remember, it was that game out there?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so he did give up 3 runs, but the point is he was attacking hitters.
Yes.
And he was getting a lot of swings and misses. And he struck out 9 in 6 innings. I mean, it was a good outing based on where he was at the time and what he needed to start showing. And then he came back the following week, the next start, where, again, over 2 starts, he struck out like 15 guys in 12 innings. And that's closer to where he needs to be.
It goes a long way to making this team better because I'm like you. He may be the most important player on the team. I agree with you on O'Neill, but if there's no Flaherty, I don't know where they're going to be able to compete pitching-wise with anybody of significance moving forward.
So he had, let me do this one time, I'll shut up, we'll take a break. I know we got Strict Nasty coming up in a little bit, but I also want to get into something else. So he had his 3-start stretch, and I'm not saying it's Bob Gibson stuff here, I'm not. But he was at a really low point, and he had to show progress. So he had a 3-start stretch in September where he pitched 17 innings, he struck out 20, only allowed 1 homer. I mean, all of that is really good. His fielding independent ERA was 3.47. That's a step in the right direction. And also he had a swinging strike rate of 13%, which doesn't make him Sandy Koufax back in the day. But compared to where he had been, for him to put 3 starts in a row where he's got the strikeout stuff and he's got the swing and miss stuff, much closer to where he had been when he was in really good form. That's encouraging. See, that's all I wanted. That's what I wanted to see from him before he entered the offseason, just to reestablish some positivity. And I think he did it. Again, it's all relative. I'm just not saying, that means he's a number one star. No, it didn't. But he was reestablishing himself and taking really positive steps that had to be done. You can't talk about him. I don't want to hear about 2019 because, he has to just show in the present that the stuff that will make him successful, that stuff is coming back to him now. Don't worry about labeling him. Don't put a number next to him. The numbers I want to see. I want to see a high strikeout rate, a higher swing and miss rate. I want to see better control. I want to see him keep the ball in the ballpark. Those are the only numbers I want to see. But is he a number one? Is he a number two? Is he a number three? Shut up. I don't want to hear about numbers. If he's good, things will fall into place naturally. If he's great, the Cardinals will be celebrating. Don't worry about designating a number. Oh, he's a number two. He's not a number one. Stop it. Let him pitch. And then it'll all take care of itself, right?
It will, but fans don't like to do that.
I know. Why do we do that?
It really is. It's like,
why do
he's
we
a
do
one
that?
or two, but I don't know. Yeah, it's like
he hadn't been a one or a two for a long time, so why are we even putting him in that company as a possibility again? That's why I'm making the point. He had to reestablish himself.
Yeah.
But you don't go from being a broken down pitcher who can't stay healthy. You don't go from that to, he's number one. No, stop it. You got to prove that, and that happens over time. You don't throw that number around willy-nilly. In fact, that's one of my, me, Mr. Grump, but in a good way, hopefully an entertaining way. Because when I get grumpy, I'm actually smiling because I kind of get a kick out of it. That's another thing about our dear media. They're always calling guys number one or number two and number. Cardinals got a bunch of number three starters. Okay, can we just be honest about this? Seriously, can we just why do we have to promote these guys as if they're something that they're not? And yet the same people, all of us, me included, keeps talking about how, you need to have better guys at the top and all this stuff. You got to have more dominant guys. Travis Sawchek said that yesterday on our show. Cardinals really need that big guy. If you want to go deep in a postseason, you're just going to have that element to go on a run. I mean, among other things, obviously, but yet when you hear people talking about it or writing about it or whatever, this guy's a number one, this guy's a two, and this guy's he's a two. No, they have a bunch of number three starters right now. What I didn't say that they're going to stay there all year. I just said, right now, I view them all as number threes. Maybe, how you give out like a C+ grade. Mm-hmm. Maybe Miklasz is like in that little area between a 2 and a 3, closer maybe to a 2, maybe.
That's fair.
Yeah. So anyway,
and if Flaherty continues to go out there and throw, and he gets 27 to 30 starts this year, he'll work his way closer to a number 2.
I'm certainly rooting for him because I like what he's been saying. And the one thing about Flaherty is he doesn't filter himself. That gets him in trouble with some of his quote fans, some of whom will never like him for some other reasons. But anyway, but when he speaks, he dispenses the truth, whether people like the truth or not. But that's why when he says something like he told John Denton about he realizes that he was holding back and he can't do that anymore, and he's got an attitude now of I'm getting after it. I believe that, and that's encouraging. I also believe it when he says that it means a lot to him to pitch great, and he knows that he's going to be a free agent, and he knows he's not going to play that game where he pretends that's not on his mind. It should be on his mind because it should give him extra motivation. I also believe him when he says that it would be very meaningful for him to spend his entire career with the Cardinals because he loves the history of the game and he knows what that means, and it's really, really special. So I love a lot of the things he's saying. And now the performance is going to have to click in. We saw some signs of it, just some signs of it, late last season.
Be a fun watch to see it happen, no doubt about that.
Yeah.